Player Will.
Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Today's the Fang character review. Sorry for the couple-day delay, but I really wanted to make sure I got my thoughts straight on this character because, well, you'll see why. But for now, the character review, pretty standard things. It's the character overview, the base and total stat analysis leading up to the report card where we look at some of those stats in the context of our kit related to other characters. We'll go through the general thoughts, just some quick hit things that I think everyone should know. We'll walk through the passives, the counters, the job abilities, and auto priority, the TMR review, some job-based vision card eligibility, some general optimization pieces, and then sample builds and Truststones just to really round things out from a comprehensiveness perspective. And so, kicking things off here, Fang is a brand new lightning unit added to the game. They've given her the unique main job of Lance of Grand Pulse with High Dragoon and Operative as those sub-jobs. She does equip spears, cloths, hats, and accessories as the other equips with a move of 3, jump of 4. So she is more of that like Dragoon stereotypical unit, not necessarily just like a Lancer kind of unit. She's a 90 cost unit. The faith recommendation for me is definitely 50. No reason to go higher than that, quite frankly. Her max range on the job is 6 squares away, so relatively long range. She does have 1 AoE ability on that main kit and 3 single target scaling abilities just for a distribution. From a resistance standpoint, minus 10% to strike. You don't love to see that right now, but the rest of them could be better, could be worse. 20% to slash, 10% to both missile and magic, with the 0% to pierce. That minus 10% to strike really does stand out, though. Just giving the timing of the meta of the game in particular. For the mastery ability, they did give her a permanent decrease AP consumption of 15% and Pierce Res Pen of 10 innately. This is a slight step ahead of what most Pierce units get access to. It's not a game changer, but you got to respect it actually. That 10% against higher Pierce resistant enemies does help. The Dream ability, they gave her a free 20 accuracy and 15 AoE res. That accuracy is going to come back in a very important part in the conversation soon. But for now, the base HP or the base stat analysis, base HP is a little bit behind what some of the post-3rd anniversary units are. We see most units kind of end up where my cursor is here in these higher echelon of buckets. She's not in a bad spot. She's like right below the 75th percentile. It's not the end of the world, but definitely a slight step back from some of the damage dealing units that we've seen recently over the past couple months. Now, base attack, she is above that percentile. She's in a high spot of base attack. Overall, this is in a relatively healthy spot. I'm not terribly concerned about her attack stat per se. She's got a great passive to amplify it as well. The base agility actually pretty high here at 58. This is one of those ones that, you know, there's still a lot more that goes into the total agility calculation, but having that 58 does do a couple small good things there for when you apply the agility percent vision cards, that she gets just a couple extra points ahead of where some units get. We'll dive into that deeper soon. Base dexterity is kind of meh. She's in a good grouping of units. Obviously, there's a ton of units in this 190 to 210 range, let's say, for base dexterity, but not a strong point. She's very much average, or way below average, to be fair, in that regard. And then base luck, it does skew relatively high. It's not amazing, but she is above average in that regard. So overall stats, and we kind of compare those charts and put them into one as a total summary here, I wouldn't say there's necessarily any weaknesses per se. The dexterity kind of stinks because lightning as an element does try to skew higher on the critical side of things. So don't pierce type attack units. There is a lot of crit rate up access that she can get to, but I would have liked to see the dexterity higher just given the nature of the build. When you include the total stats in terms of the mastery abilities, the board nodes, things of that nature, not a ton of changes, maybe a slight step back on the luck. The agility does end up jumping up, but they don't really do a ton in terms of agility points. But overall, I think it's a pretty healthy spot to start. We just got to see if the rest of her job and kit holds up to it. Now, overall agility, this actually is a very good, strong spot for her, where her agility with those vision cards with no passives equipped is at that like 80.5, I rounded up to 81 here, range, where she is in this higher echelon of units for just, let's say, base regular agility. When you do equip a passive that you will likely have on a fair amount of the time, she jumps into this much higher bucket. She's not exactly at 87, but she's like 86.5. So again, I kind of rounded up there. That's definitely a noteworthy thing, though, for her overall agility, and we'll talk more about that soon on the report card. The crit hit and crit avoid, and total crit hit rate, not something that I'm really leaning into. You're going to need a lot of vision card help to get it up there, but it is there, so you do have access to it potentially, but innately not a strong spot. And crit avoidance is relatively average as well. This looks below average, but most units tend to fall in this 50 to 55 range, so it's really kind of whatever. So either way, no strong takeaways here. The accuracy, she does start off very innately accurate because of that 20% from the 140. No passives to increase it though, so she just stays there. So while it starts off on a good side, while it starts off on a good note, and technically is a good thing, overall, when you compare it to characters once they do start equipping passives to really get themselves up there, she falls behind pretty quickly. It's fine. She does have an ability that gets an extra 30% hit chance on it, but I would have liked to see a little bit more here. But there's a small asterisk here too as well. Her weapon that you'll likely equip most of the time does have 15 accuracy on it for her in particular. So this does jump up to like this 195 spot. So it is technically a little higher than what this is really telling you. And there is a aim build of that weapon, which I do recommend. It's at 20% accuracy, which will end up getting her a little higher here. You could just go Alex Ring, and I do recommend that too for hitting some of these evade teams. But overall, the accuracy starts off in a good spot, can still be in a good spot, does still take some work though. But the evasion perspective, very bottom rung on whatever could be considered evasion. I don't think it's there personally because Pierce nor Lightning is really tuned for any kind of evasion potential, so I would consider herself not an evade unit at all. Now, when we get to the report card, overall effective HP is about a C. It's relatively average. 0 defense, no spirit. She does have 15 AoE res innately, no unit res though, and the overall HP stats, fine. It ends up being near the exact average. I would have liked to have seen this a little bit higher, to be honest. Pierce units that are on the squishier side have never fared well in this game. Now, survivability in terms of all those things that can keep her up potentially, which is, to be fair, a more important grade than effective HP nowadays. The game has changed so that the survivability tools really are what create a character's, survivability in the battlefield. She's got a 7,500 HP physical barrier, hugely helpful for her. 25 unit resistance on a buff. She is courage capable. She is also protect capable on a sub job, but not likely to use that in the buff rotation, nor is it recommended nowadays. She does have a restore 30% HP on a kill on her 120 ability, so you can regenerate some health. And she does have 2 drain-ish abilities, relatively minor though, but I've seen her use it enough that it does technically count. She also has access to a 40% HP heal on the sub job, which very niche. We'll talk about the conditions in which she uses it, but I don't think they're impactful enough to really raise his grade up. She's kind of average for his survivability. Courage has not been nearly as strong as it used to be. Now for the damage, I'm going with a B here. The attack stat's okay. The Pierce penetration is as good as it gets in the game for now. The defense pen is fair. She's at 50 pre-limit break. We'll get another 40 on the limit break. It's okay. Having that uptime tied to the limit break isn't a good thing though. She does have a short range physical barrier break, so there is technically access for that as well. She just hasn't wowed me though, even with all the imperils that she has, which she does have a 25% imperil and a 15% imperil that stacked together. You'd think it would blow people up. It doesn't, and we've seen that with other high Dragoon jobs as well. It just doesn't do the damage that you would expect a 40% imperil to do. Particularly with all the debuff weakening that's in the game right now, you'll notice that more and more. Now, the agility going with an A here, base 80 versus 78. With passives, it's up to 86 versus 81. And her main buff that she will start the fight off with is 25% agility. So she is exceptionally fast. That is probably the best thing about her, quite honestly. The accuracy, I'm going with a C here. Decent innate accuracy. Again, 30% extra hit on the 120 ability. Needs lots of external help, though. There's no guaranteed hit in the kit. I do think her vision card changes this quite a bit, though. We'll talk about that more in the job-based vision card section, though. Now, for evasion, going with a C-. Not an evade unit. Lightning and Spear is not balanced for it. I don't even think there's remotely a chance of ever pulling it off. The movement, going with a B+ here. Move +1 option on a passive ability, certainly nice. The jump 4 innately, also certainly nice. She also has access to a move +1 buff on the sub job, so a lot of different ways that you can vary up her movement quite a bit. I like that. The auto ease of use, though, going with a C. She's kind of fragile, even with the 7,500 HP barrier. The buff optimization can be a little bit difficult. Those jump 4 units also can be a little wonky in that some of these maps, the topography, they'll move in a way that you're just not used to, or maybe with her range 6 ability, she gets baited sooner than you hope. I don't think she's that easy to get full value out of, so I'm going with a C here, average, if not maybe even slightly below her. I think she's a very difficult unit to really reach the ceiling with. The game disruption, going with a C-. Really hard to justify among the Pierce units right now in terms of where does she fit. Eld is top tier. Flagbearer Glacial is right there. Veritas of the Wind is a very compelling pick as well. Dialdo, if we want to throw in the tank there. Jade the Celebrated is kind of in that mix somewhere. He's not objectively better than Fang, but they're not far off. A Volk coming in maybe changes that with her being lightning and him being fire, that she can counteract some of the water that might come at him. But man, she doesn't do all that well against Strike. isn't really tuned to go anti-magic either. It's very hard for me to see where she does anything in the game disruption at the moment. The passives, though, when we get into the more job attributes here, going with a C plus here, they're good enough passives, nothing uniquely crazy though. For all the amped up passives we've seen as of late, she's not nearly as good as many of the units we'll see though soon. They're not bad, they're just not to the tier that we're used to seeing. The counter also see very average proc rate, very average benefit for what she actually getting. The overall job and kit, B minus. Excellent AP management though. That's definitely a good thing for her. She's got decent enough utility as we'll see. The damage is okay. The final grade though, going with a B minus here. Again, kind of lackluster from what I normally review. There's lots of pros, and she's honestly not a bad unit. She will likely, quite honestly, have some future upside usage as we just kind of fade through this current meta that we're seeing. But it's not without issues. You don't like to see a character come out of the box with this many asterisks tied to them. So yeah, going with a B minus. Not a bad unit, not her time though. Now my general thoughts, the utility does check a lot of boxes. The seal enemy barrier break, 6 squares away, certainly nice. 25% pierce resin peril on a select 2 ability. She's got a short range physical barrier break. You can get an additional 15% imperil on hit from her subjob, which she passes on to herself and teammates. Technically has a 40% heal capability. Not commonly used, but I've seen it used sometimes. We'll talk about that in the job section. And her buff, 40% attack, 25% agility, 25 unit res, exceptional buff. So there is a decent amount of team utility there that you can work with. I do have problems though with the damage. I just haven't seen enough in my test so far. She's really limited to the 50 defense pen. The limit break adds 40 for 3 turns. It's okay, but that limit break's only usable once. It's only 3 turns that it lasts for. Most damage dealers, you want to get them consistently higher than that if possible, or at least have access to be higher than that if possible. The 20 pierce res pen is above average, but 20% penetration is not good by any means. We've seen even against like strike teams, you need it against that 40 to 60% to really kind of make that dent. The attack stat, it's in line with others. Nothing crazy though, but it's certainly a good spot because of her passive ability. Now, she's best against physical damage, but ironically struggles against strike at the moment. So I don't know how many variations of physical teams you're going against at the moment other than strike. It just seems too niche in the broad scheme of like physical damage at the moment for what for what she excels in, if you know what I mean. I'm kind of confused on that. She's a valuable lightning addition to give them a spear option, though. That's one of my favorite things about this edition, is that she checks a very much needed box for the lightning element and giving them a spear type unit. That's been missing for a very, very long time. There's no definitive best second buff, in my opinion, here, which makes for nice build alternative versions. I personally like the High Dragoon buff that gives the 15% pierce and peril. It's hard for me to see myself turning that off, but there's a lot of TMR options. Her normal second buff is just the courage ability, which is kind of lackluster. You'll see soon that I think you don't have to prioritize it. So I like the flexibility of what you can do with her, particularly because of her high agility, that you can have some opportunities to do some cool stuff. Now, to that point, her high agility makes for some good Truststone flexibility as well, where if you wanted to go for an aim build, which you probably will and have to in a large majority of instances, or the attack stones, where I'm talking about, defense pen here and really jacking up that attack stat. It's one of the few times I might actually play with it, because these very, very high agility units, you can sacrifice some of those agility points to really round out some of these other stats. Now, I don't think seal barrier break is as high impact as some of the other seals, like re-raise seal that we saw from Vivian Helena. And it really just comes to the idea that, like, if you have a barrier, we'll use her 7,500 HP physical barrier. The timing of it's very difficult. That, like, if you were to like get closer to the front line and you haven't used your ability yet, someone can still walk up and just shatter that barrier immediately. Very common. But even if you were to go up against an enemy that doesn't have a barrier break, if you were to walk forward, they were to hit you and take off like 75% of the health of that barrier, and then you seal a barrier break, well, your barrier is already almost up anyway. The timing impact of it isn't the same as the re-raise seal, where re-raise will last you like multiple turns down the line. It's hard to put into words, but I've seen it with Daria recently as well. It's a nice value add. I don't think it's as high impact, though, for preserving the integrity of that barrier as people might think at first glance. Now, she's likely a stronger addition for the Pierce team than she is for the Lightning team, in my opinion. I do think she's tuned for that, given the imperils that she offers in the kit. She seems like a unit who requires reincarnation to be good, though. And I don't say this very often in the reviews, but you'll see in the builds that I get to here, the stats are like just barely missing there. She's a unit that does require some extra HP. She is a unit that does require some of the crit hit rate and the accuracy to really go toe-to-toe with top-tier teams. She's a unit that requires some of that extra attack to really drive home the damage. Now, the good news for me is, out of all the Final Fantasy 13 characters, none of them are reincarnation worthy except for her. Most people at this point also have the other three units built, so it's probably not that hard to get the 13 Mind Spheres, but I could at least see some ease in reincarnating her, easier than most other collab units. I'm not recommending it, but I think this unit is significantly different. Not all units are. Some units are just fine with no reincarnations, or maybe just a simple 20 to get a couple extra stats. I don't think she's one of them though, but just being honest there. Now for passive abilities, these two are my favorite. That's the attack 24%, the defense pen of 40. You have to have that on. I'm a sucker for the High Dragoon focus with that agility percent and the strike res that at least brings her to the positive 5% strike res. So I say it's kind of a necessity, but the agility, you'd have it on anyway. You can obviously play with the move +1. I have. It's okay, but I don't think it's nearly as consistent as these other two. The counter abilities, this one's really lackluster. This feels like an ability from 3 years ago. It's a 20% chance to reduce all damage taken by 30%. There's so much reaction block rate in the game, and that's such a low percent of damage taken that I don't like that as their solo primary counter ability. Even the other two, the preemptive ones, I don't really think it's all that much damage or opportunities for usage given the range and the attack types. Now, for the main job buffs, the big thing for her is the Arcane Defense too. That's that teammate buff with the 7,500 HP physical barrier. It's also the attack buff, the agility buff, the 25 unit res, the reaction block rate for self. It's also for 4 turns. Very noteworthy. This buff is really what sets her apart. I think this is where her biggest value add is in terms of bumping up her teammates. The activity boost buff, courage is kind of whatever here, given the amount of follow-up attacks, given the amount of courage remove that we're seeing from other units. The restore AP is certainly nice, but she's got enough AP management that I don't think it's necessary. I think you can do without going without this buff as a secondary priority. There's some units that require both buffs to be good. I don't think Fang is one of them. It's actually a good thing for her. Now, look at the main job abilities. I do have italicized here in white the adjusted AP cost because of her 15% decreased AP usage. So again, that's one of the strong points for her. It is 4 different kinds of pierce attacks. 2 of them have the piercing capabilities that you can stab through multiple enemies. The Blitz 2 one is technically an arcing trajectory, so she will be able to utilize different height variations to extend the range a little bit should you want to. But this first ability is a drain ability. Absorbs HP. I actually really like this one for late fight if you're in like a 1v1 duel that you can at least like get some health back and maybe win that battle of attrition. But if she's the last unit on the battlefield, I don't know if I have hopes for her winning that duel, but regardless, good ability. Blitz 2 is that seal barrier break, 6 squares away. Certainly a really strong ability given the upside of the trajectory of it. Not much more to say than that though. 165% mod is okay. The break thrust is a actually very strong tank busting ability. That's the physical barrier break. It will decrease defense by 80% for just that cast. That's the highest we've seen. I think it's technically the strongest defense break you can get access to. It's a 200% mod, and the piercing, I actually don't hate this ability for like trying to go up against a tank that, we've seen a lot of tanks that reduce defense pen for characters that I still think reducing an enemy defense by 80% is pretty enormous. I like what they did with this ability personally. And Dual Smite is the select 2 with the 25% apparel. It's a 30% extra hit chance, and you'll regen some health upon killing an enemy, 30% HP. This ability is actually pretty good. Now for the limit break, this was a little tough. WOTV stats has it completely mistranslated. It's actually not a bad limit break. This is the 40 defense pen for 3 turns. It will increase the modifier by 60, bringing it from 260 to 260 if an enemy has a defense up applied. So I've put the in-game translation in here that it will deal extra damage to targets affected by defense up. That's number 1. And there's a sequence ability to this that upon follow-up attack, it'll do this extra strike ability. So basically the way this works is she can target an enemy using any one of these squares in the pink, but the targeting radius is actually this AoE that you... So there are some funky things in terms of her using the limit break that she can friendly fire with it, so she might not use the limit break with certain teammates around. Doing some very basic tests, it looks like the way this works is that whatever damage you do to the enemy here, you will do 75% of that damage number to anyone in the AoE around them. So it targets like an AoE, but I think it scales off unit res, to be honest, even though this is a targeting radius, because I think this ability is unit scaling. I have to do some more about the damage calcs on this. It's a very interesting limit break. It's not exceptional, but it's not bad either. particularly for 37 AP. Let's also say that much. Now, for the sub job, this is okay. This is where you get that 40% heal. The only time she'll use this is if an enemy is not in range. She actually will move to herself and teammate and restore 40% of the HP. I've seen it a couple times, but very inconsistent. I don't think it's nearly as good, and we'll talk quickly about slowing thrust. It's fine. I'll leave it at that. I don't love this ability. At least on a sub job. If it was main job, I'd probably like it a lot more, but I don't think it's worth equipping the sub job. I think because it's a very hard decision to not equip the High Dragoon, primarily for the Spineworm's Blessing, where you grant this on-hit effect to allies of imperiling Pierce Res by 15%. It's also the Restore AP of 20. That's why I think this is a better buff than the Courage buff. You still get 20 AP anyway, and it's an additional unit res of 25. She already gets it from her buff on the main job, so it's a little bit redundant, but still, I think the Imperil and the AP Restore are very strong. It's very hard for me to not want to have the sub-job on all times. There's also the Drain Jump ability. It's that second Drain ability I was mentioning that I have seen her use. It's kind of nice to get her up in the air, avoiding damage. I think it's the best sub-job because the operative one doesn't really do anything, in my opinion. If this had the buff that has the shield on it, which would be redundant, she has a shield anyway, maybe better because there's like an AP restore tied to it, but I don't think Toxic Assault is a great ability for her, nor is anything here, quite honestly. But for the TMR review, this one's also slightly mistranslated. The effect of this, it's a teammate buff, is that when you hit an enemy, it will eliminate their ability to use any CT up abilities at all. So the easiest example, if you were to use this TMR, then you were to hit a King Bradley, who's got a lot of CT up in his kit, he will not generate any CT up after you've hit him after using this. So this actually is a valuable TMR in that it does something very unique on a very powerful game-changing attribute. There's been a couple times during those strike teams at the moment where Dark Ketone, her follow-up abilities like some CT restore, and the same thing with some of their other abilities. If you hit her after using this, all of that CT restore is gone. So kind of a nice thing for having a little counterplay. It's not amazing, it's very niche, but I'm very glad it's in the game. I've already used it once with good results. We'll see how creative people can get with this. Now for the job-based vision cards, there's a ton that Spear is built out for. It's probably one of the best in the game, only second to Strike. It goes very well with Axe teams here where they have 2 different unit scaling cards and 1 AoE card. Fists goes great, and primarily because of the Believers and the Bonds of Brotherhood, that unit and agility on 1 vision card. Cannot talk about that enough. That they also have the AoE card. Fists and Spear is a match made in heaven. And just skipping ahead, Staff Devout is the same thing. They have the same access to the same vision cards. The pairing with Fists or Staff Devout is exceptional for Pierce units. Dagger is technically there too. Could use a little more love, but technically there. And I think Mace is technically there also. And Mace and Dagger has some good overlap. Sword Red Mage is getting there, but I think it's far less so. I just know that Sword Red Mage are some of the best rainbow units you can possibly put into teams. And so with Pierce, I can see some good future upside. But I did want to pause for a second on her vision card coming next week. I don't always look ahead to the unique specific character vision cards. I think this one's an exception though, where this gives her a very valuable 10 AoE res. It's also a free 25 accuracy, which is very material to her hitting some of these 2P teams and other like mid-tier evade units. The reaction block is very important. She's got none innately in the kit. The 30 human killer, obviously certainly nice for her in those teams, but the Guild War, this is the most impactful PvP zone for most people. This is a Guild War effect that it's a 12% magic mitigation on the larger the area size. She's got no tools innately to deal with like real strong magic teams. Not that this is like gonna suddenly make her an anti-magic unit, but this is a very, very strong thing to add into her survivability, that this is a different Fang with this vision card than without this vision card. Obviously, it pairs very well with all the different kinds of spear units. It's another card with the Axe group that we were just talking about. It has some good synergies already that you can throw this in there as well. I'm a big fan of what this vision card does for Fang in particular, but also for spear units in particular. There's a lot of spear units that are really going to like this. But getting back on track, general optimization, I think the Bladed Lance is the best weapon here. I wish it was a better weapon, quite honestly. I don't love all the effects on it, but I do think it's the best weapon for her. I'll just leave it at that. The other two are honorable mentions, but that's my favorite. The other equips, Survival Vest or Alexandrite Ring. I'm really like sticking with those two for this unit. I don't see many other opportunities that I'd prefer anything else. The Espers, you have a lot of things to choose from between the regular DPS Espers here, Dark Odin, Ultros, Bahamut, or Dark Bahamut specifically. I think Dark Siren is like a slightly tankier option with the debuff weakening and the accuracy, which she needs, so I have it there. And then obviously there's 3 very viable lightning espers that I do think are good choices too. The TMRs, you could go anywhere with this, quite honestly. I just went with the basic case TMRs and the agility oriented ones. I do like hate down TMRs for her, again, given some of her survivability. I kind of want her being hit last, but you could do a whole video on the best TMRs, so I'm going light here for now because I want to get to the sample builds. And the first one is the mono lightning build. This really only comes together because of the FMA card here. This is one of those synergies where it's lightning and strike. It's kind of like a match made in heaven. Alphonse technically has a barrier that for a long time we would turn off because of the amount of barrier break in the game. All of a sudden, Fang can maybe protect that barrier for him. Certainly nice to see. The vision cards, you can go a bunch of different ways here. Because of this this main slot vision card, you can put anything you want. I just went for the attack percent for this team in general. Even for the sub vision card here, you could do something other than Dark Ifrit. For the equipments, I went Alex Ring, kept it simple. I actually went for the aim build on the spear in both of these. I went with my recommended skills. And then for the Truststones, I went HP set and agility set. We'll dive more into Truststones on the next slide. But for now, I think this is pretty on par for what you'd expect. And I just want to look at the general stats here. Number 1, 9100 HP. It's okay. It's not great. Even with a 7500 HP barrier, 9100 is a little bit lower than what we're comfortable with nowadays. Again, only 10 defense, 4 spirit. The attack stat is near 1600, but a lot of that's being carried by this main slot vision card here. 121 agility. Just skipping ahead a little bit, this accuracy here of 347%, most high evade or high-end 2Ps will be in the 305 to 330% range for evade. And so the accuracy, the way that works is you take the accuracy rate minus the evade rate. So this current accuracy rate with the Alex Ring, with the aim spear, it's only about 15% hit rate. You know, her 120 ability will have an extra 30. If it's a side attack, would be an extra 15. But there's ways you can still increase this. I have an HP set. You could go luck set. I put attack percent in this main slot. You could go accuracy, like the Aegon Vision card, or maybe even Secrets of the Heart, if you want to throw in some luck for the whole party. The point is, even wearing the Alex Ring, wearing an aim-oriented Esper, it still leaves some room to be desired. But 27 unit res, 45 AoE res, 35% reaction block rate here. In terms of the mods, most of it's lightning oriented, 83 lightning attack, 15 pierce attack. It's at 62 defense pen at the moment. That'll get it to 100 after the limit break, 20 pierce res pen, and 20% debuff weakening. This is not a bad lightning team, to be honest. But I do think her biggest upside is in the spear team, where she adds those extra imperils, not only on the 120 ability, but on the teammate hit. And this, again, there's a lot of flexibility in play here, too, because of the full metal vision card that allows you to put any card you want here in the main slot. This, to me, I would rather have the Fang vision card here than the Irvine vision card. I think it's a big value add for this whole team. And again, there's some flexibility here in these yellow boxed ones. I went for the survival vest instead of the Alex Ring here. I kept everything else the same roughly, but you'll see in the spear team, because of the L division card that gives the HP percent, she's actually much higher here. She finally crosses that 10,000 HP threshold. 23 defense, 8 spirit, about 1700 attack here, so it does get much higher. 124 agility overall, 41 unit res, 39 AoE res. She'll basically double her acquired AP, which is very, very strong. 21 elemental chain res is unique to her in this build. The modifiers change a little bit, but are still relatively the same. 35 lightning attack, 15 pierce attack, and 45 human killer. Does net effect add up to about what you saw on the previous one. Down to 50 defense pen here, and no debuff weakening. So it's a slightly different kind of thing, but it's very, very close overall. You can kind of see what I mean with the reincarnation conversation now that, like, okay, 10,000 HP here, 9,000 HP here. If you gave her an extra 2k HP, she'd certainly look a lot different. That attack stat would be approaching 2,000. The accuracy would be a lot better. I'm never a proponent of it, but this unit seems like a unit who kind of needs it. Now, lastly here for the Truststones. Left side, I think HP is fine. Technically, I will make a ninja edit here, throw in the luck, definitely a viable one. I think the HP and luck, element res 2. And really, those last two nodes, you can do anything you want. You can do more element res, you can do strike res of 7. You can do status effects if you want. I think there's a lot of flexibility. The right side, I think I'm okay with this. The attack 20%, the defense pen of 10, pierce res pen of 10, and the lightning attack 10. The dexterity and acquired AP, you could probably flex out for some other things because she doesn't get a ton of dex based off of her base dexterity. The acquired AP, she's got enough of that you may not need it. If I were to supplant it with something else, reaction block 20 might be one of them. and the accuracy of 10, or even just the regular crit rate of 10, because it's roughly equivalent to the dex of 15%. But I think these top 4 are pretty safe options overall. You might be able to throw healing power in there as well. I don't have it specifically written because I don't think she's a unit that requires a lot of healing per se in terms of her own sustainability. But there's a couple drain abilities. There's the HP upon kill. I wouldn't hate healing power 10 with the reaction block 20 in lieu of these bottom 2. But that's the Fang character review overall. I'm not sure exactly how to feel because I think it's not the right time for her. So I think we're all approaching it with a little bit of a bias. I do think she's a good unit though, so I do think there's some things here that will help her down the line. But we've also seen units we say that, and then by the time comes, they're already power crept. So I'm being as open and honest as I can about my evaluation at the moment. Trying to be realistic with my expectations, but that's it for now. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll talk to you all later.